his culinary magic to Clearwater's Harborview Center in March of 1997. Prior to that, he owned and operated Metro Catering Company in Tampa, but Chef Terzak's experience reaches far outside the Tampa Bay area. He was executive chef at the American Stanhope Hotel on Fifth Avenue in New York, and Gordon's, one of Chicago Magazine's top 10 restaurants in the Windy City. He owned 5 restaurants in Chicago, among them Terzak's, Chameleon, Ketchup, and Tamales. He's also consulted for top-rated restaurants in Florida, Virginia, Chicago, and New York. Chef Terzak studied culinary arts at Du Maupert School of French Cooking in Glenview, Illinois, and was acknowledged by Food and Wine magazine as one of the top 60 chefs in America. For years, he hosted the cable TV series Great American Cookout, but now he's the host of What's Cooking, Harborview?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of What's Cooking, Harborview. Now today, we have a special edition because we have the illustrious mayor of Clearwater, Rita Garvey, here, and she's going to clue us in on a couple of little home-style dishes from Minnesota, and we decided to kind of build the whole show around her by doing kind of a home-style theme. So the lineup for today is going to be home-style pot roast, which we're going to do in steps, and a little baked Gouda cheese from Minnesota, and a little hot tuna dish from Minnesota that Rita's going to make for us. And then we're going to finish this off with a baked apple in puff pastry stuffed with chocolate and raisins and served with warm caramel sauce. So we're going to start out with the pot roast, and we're going to do it in 3 or 4 steps. The first step is to get yourself a plain, unseasoned beef brisket. Now, sometimes in the store they sell these in halves, and that's okay. I've got a big pot, but you can do a half of this at a time and do it in a smaller pot, too. Now, the blood that's inside here, I'm going to want to keep when I make this. So what we'll do is we just put the brisket in there. And now this is step 1. That's just getting it started and getting it cooking. It takes 3.5, 4 hours to cook this, 2 more hours to cool the meat, a little bit of time to cut it. This takes a little time to make this dish. So sometimes you make this the day before and get it ready and then just reheat it. Then we're going to put a little bit of carrot, a little bit of celery, a little bit of onion, and a little bit of mushroom in the pot. And we're going to do a combination of different herbs. We're going to do a little bit of dried leaf thyme. We're going to do a little bit of dried tarragon. We're going to do some oregano and some basil and a little bit of pepper. Not too much pepper, because you got to remember now, when you reduce the juice that we make the pot roast in later, you'll be concentrating the flavor of all the beef broth and vegetables and herbs. If you have pepper or any salt, you'll concentrate the flavor and it might be too salty. So you want to go easy on the spices that you might over-concentrate later. And then we're going to add a little bit of tomato juice to it and a little bit of garlic. Well, a lot of garlic. And now we're going to cover this with cold water. And we're going to put it on the stove to cook at a high temperature until it comes to a simmer. Then after it comes to a simmer, we'll turn it down. Now, you can also bring it up to a simmer and then take the entire pot with a lid on it and put it in the oven at around 250 or 300 and cook it that way too. Either way, the definition of the technique for making this is braising. You're either braising it on top of the stove or you're braising it in the oven. But either way, you'll be braising it. That's step 1. And now for step 2. Okay, now step 2 in this delicious pot roast is trimming the brisket. Now what I did was I cooked this one just like I'm cooking the one back here yesterday, and I let it sit overnight in the refrigerator. So now it's nice and cold, and that's the best time to trim it. And so what you're going to do first is take off all the excess fat that's on the brisket. Now, a little bit of fat is going to be okay, but you don't want too much on there. That's most of it on the outside. Then there's a little bit of fat on the inside. Now, the thing about the brisket is that you cut it in half lengthwise first, because the grain runs 2 different ways, and you need to cut this brisket against the grain with either side of the meat. Now with this side here, you cut it this way against the grain. And you cut yourself off some nice pieces like that. Remember, this is already nice and cooked and tender. It's just cold. And when we heat it up, it'll be great. Okay, so that's how we trim that side. Now this side, when we cut this side, see there's a little bit of fat in the middle of this particular side of it. So when we trim this side, we kind of cut the fat out like that. So you kind of eliminate that piece from the dinner table. Okay, that's the trimming and the cutting of the brisket. Now we're going to go to step 3. Alrighty, now step 3 in this unbelievable pot roast is getting the vegetables ready that are going to be served around the meat. Now, the celery, carrots, and onions and mushrooms that we put in this pot, which is simmering back here, they're going to be so stock-logged and void of texture and color that they're going to be useless in terms of looking good or really being able to enjoy very much when you're eating them. So what we do is we take the same ingredients and maybe add a couple of more too and blanch them in the stock that's finished. Now what we did was, after the brisket is tender, which is about 2 to 3 hours, see, then we strain the juice out and reduce it down. And that's what this is here. And that gives me, believe it or not, kind of a brown juice. It's a little bit brown because I put the tomato juice in it. And it's not brown because we browned anything, which normally is what makes your sauces brown. It's just brown because of the tomato juice and the juice from the beef and the blood. Okay, so we got a little bit of sliced carrot, a little bit of mushroom that we're poaching in the juice, a little bit of potato that we boiled already, and we're just kind of heating it up in the juice. And then we're sauteing a little bit of onion with some dried leaf thyme and salt and pepper and some butter. And we've got some celery here. And what we'll do is just throw a little juice on the onion once the onion's a little bit cooked. Now, we're going to go to step 4, which is the final assembly of the dish. All right, now for step 4 for the delicious pot roast is heating up the brisket with the juice and adding the vegetables all around it that you poached in the gravy. Now you can mix them all up all the way around. You can put them in little piles, so it's kind of like a take which one you want sort of buffet. So we'll go mushrooms and celery. Oh, I think just put that juice right in there. Carrots. This is very home style. I have a feeling Rita is going to like this dish a lot because she's very home style oriented in her cooking, as I'm learning. And finally, with the potatoes, one of the things we're going to do is we'll make what we call parsley potatoes by rolling them in the parsley a little bit like this, and that completely covers them. We throw a few potatoes on here like that. Now I put a little piece of braised cabbage in here too, and you might want to throw any kind of little veg that you want in here, leeks or other kinds of mushrooms besides these little buttons. And voila! This is also known as the pot au feu in France. And actually, this is kind of where I got the recipe, but I've converted it to the American version. Voila! Hot roast. Alrighty, we're back with who I promised you we would be back with, our Mayor Rita. And by the way, we're doing a little series with the commissioners that are all going to come on the show and do one of their favorite dishes. And today, Rita has a lot of history in her family in Minnesota in terms of she's from an agricultural farm family.
I grew up on a dairy farm. I have 15 brothers and sisters. I milk cows and all those kinds of things. So I brought a little bit of my history with me today and have given you the opportunity to make a dish that I grew up with.
Which is great. And what happened was Rita's family, who owns a cheese farm in Minnesota, sent us down some samples. And that was one of the things that we were going to make one of our dishes out of today. And those two dishes that we are going to make, by the way, which are both Rita's, kind of. She gave me the list of ingredients, and I kind of
It's your masterwork.
Right, but you gave me all the guidance for it. But one is a baked combination of the 3 Gouda, now I'm told. It's pronounced Gouda instead of Gouda.
My Aunt Mary said it was Gouda. Otherwise, I'd always pronounced it Gouda. So
she says it. It's true. That's that. And so we have a smoky bacon Gouda spread. It's really like a cheese spread. The one I scooped it up into some tomato sauce. And
It's smoky bison. They also raise buffalo up there.
Gotcha.
Bison, wild rice spread, and a garlic spread.
Cool.
So those are the three that you used.
I am going to quick start the tomato sauce that we're going to put our cheeses on and bake this with. And then Rita will tell you a little bit about her cheeses from her family.
My aunt and uncle, they've had a cheese factory for now probably 20 years. They have a dairy farm in Center City, Minnesota.
Now we're gonna
And this is what they sent a sample of this so that John could have a chance of finding out just the kind of things that he could work with as he prepares his dish.
What we're going to do is I put a little bit of olive oil in a pan and threw some diced onions in it. And we're going to put a little bit of rosemary.
And he measures everything.
I hear you. And a little bit of salt and pepper. Actually, I'm a very big promoter of improvisation when it comes to savory food, you know?
And that's what we talked about. We talked about putting together this tuna hot dish. And it's very simple.
Tell me what hot dish means. Now, again, how does that... Because when you first told me this on the phone, it was like first I thought I wasn't sure what to call it.
Right.
Well, is that what they call it up there?
Well, basically in Minnesota you want a dish that's hot because obviously it's 9 months of winter. So that's where it's always in my world been called a tuna hot dish. Everybody else calls it a casserole. And you have put together a casserole, which you'll show them later. But it's, when you're on a dairy farm, you've got to get food that you can do quick, get it down, feed, and get out and milk cows. So that's called a hot dish.
Gotcha. So what I did was I sauteed the onions real quick, and now we're going to throw some tomatoes in there with a little tomato juice and a little splash of white wine. And we're going to let it cook for about 15, 20 minutes. Now, I'm not going to finish that sauce, but all you do is just boil it and then puree it a little bit and season it with salt and pepper and pour it in the crock. And then you scoop your preferred cheeses into it and bake it in the oven.
And what he did was the Eichton garlic, the Eichton wild rice, and the smoky bison.
This stuff is great.
It's addictive.
It really is.
Trust me, it's addictive. But they've got a lot of things. Like I said, my aunt, peppercorn, garlic, tomato, basil, herb and spice. They do a little bit of everything.
Let me ask you a question. When you grew up on the farm, did you have like farm chores?
Sure.
This has always been a fantasy of mine, but I've never been able to do it.
Do you milk the cows? You fed the
milked
calves
cows.
and baled hay?
You baled hay.
Oh yeah, we did everything. We did everything. In fact, one interesting experience, a few years ago, we went back to Minnesota for a week and took our 3 kids with us. And we happened to unfortunately hit the haying season. We moved 5,000 bales of hay in that week. So that's why you called, we need to do fast dishes.
I hear you. Now the next dish we're going to make, which is the tuna hot dish that Rita gave me all the ingredients for, but she didn't tell me how to make it. And so I kind of made it the way I normally would have made it if she gave me the list of ingredients, which is a great way to practice cooking, period, for people at home. I mean, if you look at a list of ingredients in a recipe, I would say without the method, you should be able to figure out what to do with those dishes. So this is what I did. She gave me a list that had diced onions, diced tomatoes, mushrooms, corn or peas or carrots or whatever kind of veg I had laying around, elbow macaroni, mushroom sauce or mushroom soup, and canned tuna and a little bit of cheese. So this is what I did. I took the...
Well, the beauty about this is that versatility.
Versatility.
If you don't like onions, you don't put onions in. And I have to tell you, I've got 3 kids that don't like onions, and they found every single onion every time I put it in everything. But, I happen to like onions, I like mushrooms, so the versatility is there. You put in what you like and then not what you don't like.
Yeah, it's hard to cook for people that don't like onions.
Yes, it is.
This is how I made Rita's dish when she told me. I put the butter in the pan with a little bit of onion and a little bit of mushroom. Sauteed it a little bit. Added the elbow macaroni.
He makes it much more complicated than I do, but that's okay. That's why he's the chef and I'm not.
Added a little corn. Gave it a little mix. Added a little bit of tomato. A little mix. Get some little bit of garlic in here. Now this is one ingredient that I added that she didn't give me. But she did approve, and I thought it was good with the garlic.
Again, the key factor is flexibility. If you don't like garlic, you don't do garlic. If you don't like onions, you don't do onions. If you don't like tomatoes, you don't do tomatoes.
Now, the canned tuna. And a little bit of the mushroom sauce or canned mushroom soup, whichever you want to use.
For those of us who don't have time to make mushroom sauce, we do mushroom soup.
We had time, so we made the sauce. And get that all mixed up together, and we put salt and pepper on that. Again, Parmesan cheese.
Again, the cheese is optional. For those who don't want to have cheese, it's clearly optional.
Nikki, let me have some Parmesan cheese, would you please? So we mixed it all together. Give a little taste to make sure that it was had enough salt and pepper in it. And we mixed a little bit of parsley right into it. Thank you.
Well, I would normally add some celery sauce.
Celery salt?
Mm-hmm. As opposed to salt.
Mm-hmm.
But that's,
okay,
again, an option. Looks good.
We're getting there. Now,
sure looks better than mine.
Well, I haven't seen yours. You have the opportunity to see. I wish I could see yours. I was hoping that this turned out okay, but let me see now. Where's the Parmesan cheese? We'll put a little Parmesan cheese on here. And a little bit of parsley on top. And maybe just a little smidge of olive oil on there. And then we just brown this in the oven until it's nice and brown. And that's that. And this is what I ended up with after I baked it. And I put a little bit of hard-boiled egg and some more parsley on it. It turned out pretty good. But in a few minutes, Rita and I are going to sit down and eat some of this. But I'm going to be back to make the roasted baked apple and puff pastry stuffed with chocolate and raisins with the warm caramel sauce. Kind of like the, that's a mouthful, isn't it? That's what they said yesterday when I made it for them to taste. We'll be right back with Rita and the dessert. All right, we're back with that coup de grace dessert that I promised you, which is the baked apple and a puff pastry stuffed with chocolate and raisins with ice cream sauce. The mouthful. All right, here we go. First, you take a nice Granny Smith apple, make it flat on each side, trim the skin off. Now, cut the apple in half. One mistake that people make in serving these roasted and baked apple dishes is they give you the whole apple. It's too much apple. Too much dessert in one shot. Then you cut the core out like that, okay? Now, what I did was I kind of rounded the edges a little bit because the way we're going to stuff this in a puff pastry, we don't want any sharp edges. It'll come right through the puff pastry. Then I sprinkled this with a little cinnamon and sugar and browned it in some whole butter, and it looks like this. So it's got a little bit of flavor and seasoning on it, okay? Now, I'm going to take any old kind of cake. You can use Twinkies if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. But some kind of chocolate cake or angel food cake. And what I did was I mixed them with a little bit of raisins, and I'm going to stuff the bottom of the apple with that, like that, you see? Okay, now I'm going to take a piece of regular commercial puff pastry, which is a straight square, equal sides, all the same. And you can buy this in the supermarket, and it comes in sheets and also in squares. And all the supermarkets sell it in the freezer section. Then you take a little bit of egg wash, which is one egg yolk and a tablespoon of cream and a tablespoon of water mixed together. Egg wash the bottom and put your apple in the middle. Now, take all four corners of the puff pastry square and bring them together in the center of the apple, like this. So you make kind of like a star out of it, like so. You see, then you just pinch this down a little bit. That's part of the reason why you egg wash the inside, so this would hold when you pinched it. Now, we're going to take a little cap. We'll just use this here tip and make a little cap to put on the top. Dip that in the egg wash. Boom. Put that on there like that. Now, you could bake that just like that if you wanted, after you egg wash the outside of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few little leaves out of puff pastry to decorate it, because this is kind of a fall type dish, which makes it kind of nice. What I did is just cut a couple of little pieces of pastry out like that. And don't go all the way through the pastry. Just make a line and put some leaves on it. Now you egg wash the leaf and put them over the top here, like that. And you can take a couple of little balls of pastry too. Just kind of top it together like that, and gives it that little Noel look, if you will. Okay. Now you egg wash this whole little monster here. And you pop it in the oven, and you bake it at 400 degrees for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And it's going to look like this when you're done, you see? Now, you take your baked apple and put it on your plate and dust it. See how nice the leaves and the little nodules came out on there? And you dust it with a little sugar. What I did was, I'm going to serve this with what I call ice cream sauce. This is very quick and easy. And what you do is, you get yourself some vanilla ice cream and you melt it down. And it's a custard sauce, because ice cream is made out of milk, sugar, and eggs. And that's what custard is. And so whatever flavor ice cream you want to use, if you want to use ice cream sauce, just melt it and serve it with it like a sauce. Voila. I'm not going to say what this is again. It's too long for me to say. You know what it is. There it is. Well, alrighty then. Tuna gratin a la Rita.
Or tuna fish casserole.
Or tuna fish casserole.
From Minnesota.
The pot of foo, or the pot roast, we call it the pot roast, and the baked goat cheese, or the baked Gouda cheeses.
Which is fantastic. I've already tasted it.
Cool. I got a witness right here already, with the tomato Provençal style sauce, and then the mouthful over there, the baked sauteed Granny Smith apple stuffed with chocolate cake and raisins, wrapped in puff pastry and served with ice cream sauce on the end. And of course, we made some garlic toast points so that we could use this as an eating utensil to eat the baked cheese.
It's been a fascinating experience. I really have enjoyed being here and being able to share a little bit of my family history, but also to be part of community events. And that's what this is all about, is really letting the community know that these kinds of things are happening. And it's great. And those of us who are in elected office are just human beings like everybody else. So it was fascinating to be here and be able to share.
It was a lot of fun having you in here today. I got to tell you, I liked it.
Well, I must say that this tuna whatever a la Rita is a whole lot different looking than what I do, but then I grew up in Minnesota, again, on that dairy farm, and you had to do it quick and fast so you can get out and milk those cows. But great.
That's good. You know, one of the things about this cooking show, which is nice, is that it really gives the public, who doesn't necessarily have a chance to interact with Harborview, unless they're involved in some of the Parks and Recs things, maybe they're downstairs, to kind of brings them in and see what's going on here a little bit. And at least through the television camera, you can get in touch a little bit with what kind of foods we have here and things like that, which is kind of neat.
Right.
You know?
Well, it's interesting also because my son, who never ever cooked when he was living with us at the house, is now living on his own and has learned to cook, and he's learned to cook over TV. So it's a very positive thing. I mean, he does almost everything from lasagna to whatever on the grill. So again, watching a cooking show gave him some great ideas, and now he's a gourmet cook and keeps changing my recipes.
That's neat, you know.
But again, it's absolutely fantastic, and if I had to eat all this, I would be 500 pounds.
Now, you know what? I have a gut, and there's a reason for it. It's because of this kind of stuff. But the thing we're going to look forward to in the next, 5 or 4 shows is we're doing a series with the commissioners and their favorite dishes. And so for the next 5 months, each month, we're going to have one of them in here. I'm not sure which one and when and what their dishes are going to be like, but I guess we kind of set a precedent today in how we're going to handle their dishes, which is kind of neat.
I thought it was great. I mean, I thought you were going to cook for me, and it turns out you told me I had to cook for you.
I wasn't sure.
Wait a minute, this is...
I figured we'd figure it out when you got here today. We did.
And it turned out it worked really well, because it gave you the creative part of taking what would be a Minnesota home tuna hot dish and making it into, what do you call it?
Gratin of tuna a la Rita. Now, of course, all the recipes will be available. You can either mail in with the stamped envelope, and that'll be on the credits of the end of the show. You can get that information, or you can get it from our website.
But the key thing, I think, with all of this is the creativity. I mean, you can do what you want. If you don't like a little bit of that ingredient, then you don't need to put it in. I mean, as I said earlier, my kids always found every onion that I put in anything. They will find every onion that you put in there. But so if you don't like onions, you don't do it. But this cheese fondue is absolutely fantastic. I haven't had a chance to taste your...
Well, we're fixing you up a doggy bag for your husband and everything else to make sure that you get all this.
My dinner is taken care of. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. It was really
thank you for working with me. It really worked out well.
I had a great time.
So did I.
I was nervous, but I got through it. But we'll be back next month with another commissioner, and we'll look forward to trying some of their dishes. For now, voila, you got it.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.